Know your numbers. It's so scary to face it, whether it's debt that you're worried about, whether it's, the financial health of your business. Just make yourself look, because it's always, always better once you know what you're dealing with.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Pivot to Profit. I am super excited for this conversation with Mona Reza today. She is an attorney and has a very impressive background that I'll tell you all about, but I am so excited that you're here. How are you today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on, Pam. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, this is so fun because so often we talk about money, but then the legal piece of it and the generational wealth piece. So super excited to dive in. So let me officially introduce you to our audience. So Mona is an experienced attorney, entrepreneur, and business strategist with over 25 years of legal practice. Her career spans estate planning, trust administration, and business planning for both nonprofit and for-profit entities with a special focus on healthcare practices. After growing and negotiating the sale of her husband's medical practice, Mona recognized the unique challenges business owners face beyond legal matters. That insight inspired her to launch Stellar 5 Legal and Stellar 5 Consulting, where she empowers clients with clear, actionable advice during pivotal life and business transitions. I love that. That's so amazing. So wonderful. All right. So before we dive into all the questions and your journey, I just want to say, hey, listener, if you're a business owner who's struggling with your financials and don't have that financial piece, where are my books? Why do I have this tax bill? We would love to help you. My company, Pivot Business Group. Just go to pamjordan.com and jump on a call with my team. All right, Mona, are you ready to dive into it?
I'm ready, Pam.
All right. So the first question's the easy one.
Okay.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
So I wanted to be a cardiologist initially, and then I realized I'm super squeamish around blood, and I hate actually listening to people's healthcare problems. And so I think my aunt was a physician. I really looked up to her, and I think that was it. And then probably going into high school and college, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be on the news, and I really liked that piece. And I have a degree in communications, and I ended up going to law school for a number of reasons. So I think at this point in my career, I think I'm 53 now. I'm so excited to be moving back into communications a little bit.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about what was little Mona taught about money from your parents, friends, the community? What were you told that money was and how to interact with it?
Yeah, and that's a huge piece, because it took me years to figure out that the money mindset is so important, right? It just blocks you. And I think part of it was this idea of money and humility don't go together, right? Did you come back and you're like, oh, they have so much money, like it's a negative thing, or that this gift is so over the top, or any of that. And so there was this almost not even shame, because my parents were very middle class, but it was this idea that there's some, like the poor shall inherit the earth kind of mentality towards money. And so you always felt embarrassed to want more or to bill more, right? When you start working, is that, oh, the client will always push back, right? Or 80% of the clients will always push back. And you feel so bad that, oh, am I being greedy? That do I make enough? And in healthcare, I see a lot of that, practitioners who feel like they can't charge more, or they shouldn't be asking for that deductible or copay. And then you have to tell them it's the law. You have to ask for it. So I think really in the last 4 years, I changed my mindset around money, and I've seen, what a difference that makes.
I love that. I love that. So you have a background in communications, then you got your law degree, your business had a whole medical practice, but when was your first financial win? When was the first, I can do this. This is working. This matters. Tell me about that moment.
Yeah. It really came with my husband's business. I think I got a master's in tax while my kids were little. So I'd gone back, I did my LLM, and then you feel like now I really have to work in this field because I'm committed. And so I was working at the law firm that I was with for years and years. And my husband's accountant called and said that, you got to come in here. He's doing so well, but what's happening with the books? And so I went in, and there were no books. He was walking around with a saddlebag and a checkbook, and anybody who approached him, he'd write them a check. And the billing was all done out of his office. he would give them closed envelopes to look at the EOBs and do the billing and just trust, right? And that's another, with money mindset is it's not trust, it's laziness, right? You don't trust people. You've got to help them out. You've got to review things. And so when I started looking, we were going to the beach that weekend. I brought everything with me and I started going through it and I started finding so much money, um, like tens of thousands of dollars just in discrepancies in billing. And within 18 months, I was able to increase his revenue 3 times and bring him up to 7 figures.
That's
And,
huge.
it's huge and I like to take credit for it, but I will say it's low hanging fruit in a lot of healthcare businesses.
And so what you found is he just wasn't billing the right amounts. Is that what it came down to?
Well, it was being allocated differently. There were little things like when you become a specialist, he has his board certification in internal medicine and gastroenterology. So one of the things later that I found is that he was still being billed at the internal medicine level. And so you can find, you raise that level, you call the insurance company, you send in the new information and you bill at a higher level. So little things like that. Initially, I think it was just sloppiness. One of the things I did is I went back and became a Six Sigma black belt because it really resonated with me the way that that's done. And going through the process to have an outside biller picking up envelopes, taking it to her basement, opening it up, and then re-entering your information. So many places where mistakes can happen. And so a simple switch to, hey, we have an EMR system. We paid thousands of dollars for it. Either you use ours or we find a different biller.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And those kinds of things start closing the gap.
Yeah. It's amazing how much money you say low hanging fruit, how much money is just laying on the floor. A lot of times when we work with entrepreneurs, this is the caveat, unless someone is stealing from you, there's normally not a gush of money leaving your business. Normally it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's the leaky bucket.
Yeah.
It's 3% here, 0.5% over here, a couple points over there. And you're not making what you should, and you're not keeping as what you should because it's just leaking. And until you look under the hood and you did the work, Mona, to be like, what is going on with this money? You don't realize, holy cow, all of this does add up to a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
tell me about the journey to get your husband's practice ready to sell. Obviously, you were a part of that. So what did that look like for you guys?
So I think we're still in it to an extent. He's had many false starts with selling, and part of it's been, I think in healthcare in particular, there's this real concern about what happens to my patients. And so there's venture capital, like they've come in and we get right, that last mile is always the hardest. You get close
Yeah.
to the finish line and you start looking at the contracts and the documents. And there was one where it was almost too good to be true. And I looked at the contract and there was a clause that said something like your student loans will be paid off 100% tax free. I don't know a lot about all the other healthcare pieces, but I do know that that's not going to be tax free. Right. And so then we really dug in. We're like, prove it. Send us the code section. How is it going to be tax free? And then they just quietly took that clause out. But for med school debt, that's a lot of money that's now not on the table anymore.
Right.
And then common sense things like December 31st, you have to stop doing procedures where you're doing them. Well, where are we going to be January 2nd? We don't know yet. That's a non-starter, right? And so part of through that process with him and selling the practice and adding ancillaries, we did a lot of that. I realized, you build your own confidence that they have these attorneys on their side that are doing all of these things and sending me contracts that my gut is telling me this doesn't make sense.
Mm-mm.
And so, I think women, a lot of the times we're sold this idea that you have to be completely 100% ready before you could play at that level. And you learn that all kinds of people, men and women, they come to play without knowing anything. And so why wouldn't we join that conversation?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you started Stellar 5 2024, right? Is that the timeline?
So consulting was 2020, the
Okay.
worst timeline ever. February of 2020, a law firm client had a healthcare business she wanted me to help her with. And I had been doing consulting for other people because I'd done it for my husband. And I told her, oh, I don't do that. And she said, you should. And so I started the business in 2020, February 2020.
Oh,
And
great timing.
by March, she was out of business. She lost her funding. Everything fell apart. But I still had this company. And so I started getting my certifications, MBE, DBE, SBE with the SBA. Um, and then I ended up adopting my son at the end of that year. So I didn't do a lot with the company. Uh, and then I started Stellar 5 Legal in 2024, like 6 months ago. And
Yeah.
that really took off quickly. And of course, at the same time, I started getting more business for consulting because why not?
Hey, if one business is
Yeah.
working, let's just bring in more from the other. So help us understand what Stellar 5 Consulting is and then what Stellar 5 Legal is.
Okay. So Stellar 5 Consulting, it initially started off as I was going to do government contracts. I couldn't find my space in that initially, so I moved to doing more um, industry agnostic business consulting, the Six Sigma processes, all of that. And I did it for a bunch of, for an interior designer, for a law firm. And one of the things I've learned from being in some of these mastermind groups is, the riches are in the niches. And so even if you can do everything, don't. And now that both businesses have taken off together, I really narrowed it down to education, right? And so my first course was a healthcare business course, and I got a government contract to teach it. So it all kind of worked out. Healthcare business um, consulting, but to a wider audience. And I stepped back a little bit from the one-to-one because I don't have time. Stellar 5 Legal is, I've always done estate planning and administration and business planning, and I've been on the board of nonprofits. I've worked with nonprofits. So when I first founded that, I wanted to do something similar. And then I found I really loved was working with all kinds of entrepreneurs, but particularly with women. So it is a tax, estate planning, business planning firm for female founders and entrepreneurs. Everyone's welcome, but that's where I really wanted to focus because even in my own experience, I found you can go to somebody, went to someone to build a tech stack, and he started telling me all the reasons why it wouldn't work and why, why would they do that? They'd rather, they could. I said, you don't get it. I need someone who gets it.
Yeah.
And so, last week I went to the Advanced Business Law Institute, the Maryland State Bar Association's program, and I sat there, lovely, lovely people, and I listened to everything, and I learned a ton. But I realized, like, they're my people, but they're not my people in the way that entrepreneurs are.
Yeah.
And I think my business has been so successful so quickly because we know our people as entrepreneurs. It's people who you give them an idea and they don't start with no. They start with, okay, how do we make this happen for you?
Yeah.
And so if even 80% of the lawyers out there are telling you what's wrong with your idea before you even have a chance to try it, then I'm in a great position.
Yeah. You've got a leg up. And estate planning is a big part of what you're doing with Stellar 5 Legal.
Yes.
Help us understand, what are female entrepreneurs missing when it comes to the mindset about estate planning?
So I think there's a lot of talk about tax, and tax is part of it, but it's not the whole thing, right? The exemptions are so high right now. It's around 14 million per person. A lot of people are never going to have to worry about the federal estate tax. And so let's take that out of the equation for most people. You still have to be concerned with how your assets are going to be distributed when you pass. Probate, depending on where you live. If you live in a community property state, there's so many other issues. If you're concerned about passing your assets on to your children and your grandchildren and not to your former son-in-law or your widowed spouse's new wife, then this is something you need to worry about, your estate planning and keeping it together. And even if you feel like, well, I'm going to be dead, it doesn't matter, they'll do what they want. Part of it is planning for disability, planning for if things don't go right, having, your buy-sell agreements in place, those kinds of things. It's all encompassed in estate planning,
I love
or
it.
it should be. It should be.
So when you're talking to female entrepreneurs who are scaling their businesses and they have more money to deal with than they ever knew what to do, what are some things that they should proactively be doing to set themselves up for success in the area of taxation and estate planning?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake I see is not planning for success, right? You come in and you're like, I'm not making that much money. I don't need a lawyer. That operating agreement, especially if you have a partner, to really think of it as a prenup for your business.
Yes.
I usually see you on the other side when you decide you don't want to be partners anymore. And it's a lot harder to do anything at that point. When everyone's getting along, sit down, talk about what you both expect from the business, hash it out, and decide, hey, if it doesn't work, who gets to keep the name? Who, is it really 50-50 if you're doing 20% of the work? Those kinds of things are discussions that you should have right at the beginning of the business. Um, and if you're a solo, what happens next? What is your plan? Like think like we do for estate planning, 5 years in 5-year increments of where do I want to be? Um, and plan for it. And the other part is intellectual property.
Mm.
Um, really start thinking about that right from the beginning. What can be protected? What can't be protected? How do I make sure that those contracts protect me? Right? When someone sends me a contract, it doesn't mean I have to just sign that. Get it reviewed. Make sure that it says what you want it to say.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been so many times that we've had clients, small business owners that have partnerships that were essentially failed marriages, right? Like, and the operating agreement that they got from whatever website did not
Right.
help them determine how they were going to break up, right? And so now what I found is when you both are sitting at a table and you've got ideas and you're dreaming big, there's no money, so you kind of don't care that much. But then the business grows and then there's money
Yeah.
in the bank, and I've seen some pretty ugly breakups where it's like, okay, you guys didn't do the prenup, did the pre-work and the operating agreement. So to your point of who keeps the name, who keeps the contracts, who takes the clients, like the course, the whatever IP you built, whose is whose. And a
Yeah.
lot of times those are pretty messy breakups.
Yeah. And
And
there's a
who,
lot of value.
yeah, and who wins is the lawyers.
Absolutely. It's hourly. So if you are trying to punish each other, you know,
Yeah, just keep arguing over, well, what about this one? And what about this one? And just going
right.
through. And so when you're first starting out, you're an entrepreneur, say you've got a partner, what should you be asking each other? What questions you need to be able to answer so that you can start off strong with your business?
I think one of the biggest ones is they're not even legal. It's expectation of how much time do you
Mm.
see yourself putting into this? What do you bring to the table? What do you think I bring to the table? And really, hash it out because sometimes they both go in thinking they're going to be the one who's CEO. And I've seen that one go like nobody cares. But when there's speaking engagements and there's credit to be had, an award to be won, it really does matter. And so it's kind of it's important to sit down and understand all of the egos in the room, how that's going to work, and make decisions about it.
Yeah. And another piece that I see argued about a lot is how the company should be valued.
Yeah.
So how do you advise people when it's still an idea on a napkin, like how do you help them determine in 3 years when we don't like each other anymore, how are we going to value this business?
Oh, I would refer them to you if they talk to your accountant.
Yeah. And it's funny how everyone values businesses differently
Hmm.
depending on which side of the fence they're on, right? So if they're over
Yeah.
it and want out, it's amazing how that's now a $5 million business. And the one who
Right.
wants to stay and keep it and fight, no, we're broke. We're worth nothing. There's nothing for you. And so then there's this huge push and pull evaluation.
Yeah. So one of the seminars I've gone to was on the minority partner and how to value. And, I think it's even that part, right? Of going and getting advice. And I work in teams with accountants. You know what you don't know. I'm the attorney, but I always expect that my client also has a great CPA that they're working with, their financial planner. And if we work together, it's more likely that you're going to get what you wanted to get out of this. Because I can draft a plan, but if it's not funded, it's not, your trust is not going to do anything for you. Your financial planner may have more insight into what you actually have and what those values look like than I'm going to in a vacuum. So I think that's part of it is really building the team and letting the team work together to help you.
Yeah, having all the players to communicate and understand what's going on in the big picture is huge, huge.
Yeah.
So we always, with our clients, we always talk to their financial planner, their legal representation, anyone that's in the sphere of their money, we need to know what's going on. So let's talk about trusts. there's a lot of confusion about trust because there's different kinds of trusts. And people say, oh, well, you don't have enough money. You don't need a trust. So when you talk about trusts, how do you explain it like to like a 5-year, like a 10-year-old would understand? Give us the basic
Yes.
breakdown of trust because it is complicated.
This is the most common cocktail party question that I get from everybody.
Oh, good.
Um, and I think there's two pieces to a trust, right? Like, of course, like we were talking about, there's the exemption amounts, which are high now, but they may change, especially at the state level. Yeah, I'm in Maryland. There was talk of bringing it back down to 2 million. And in some parts of Maryland, that's a house,
Yeah, that's going to
and
hurt a lot of
so
people.
it's going to hurt a lot of, it was a million, not even a decade ago. And so, right now, that may not be your biggest concern, but the other reason people use trusts is the flexibility, right? Probate. And so we talk about probate and what that entails. And if you live in Maryland and probate's not that bad, but you have a beach house in Delaware or a co-op in New York, now you need to start thinking about it. And so I think explaining to them how a trust streamlines the process, at the lowest level, if we're not talking about taxes and finances, the streamlined process of um, having a revocable trust just so that your assets go through without having to go through probate, your children are able to mourn without having to also deal with this trauma of going to court and getting accountings and being able to access those funds immediately. Um, and then the next part that I realized a lot of people are confused about is setting up GST trusts because they aren't really necessary for a lot of people in terms of saving taxes. But part of it is if you've got, for example, what it does, they're generation skipping trust. So you're taxed when it comes out to you, and then it's taxed again when you leave it to your children. So some people put in these trusts to protect those assets from that double taxation. But then the question is, well, what if, we have 6 million in assets and yeah, it'll go to them, but they're not going to be taxed. And when they pass it on, it's probably not going to be taxed to their kids either. That's fine. Um, it's that idea of keeping it out of their estate entirely. Some people's children don't want that money coming in. They'd rather preserve it for their kids. So you think about what your children need. And what I do is we do a family discussion. If it's a family that's close and they want to have that discussion, they'll bring their kids in at that point and say, hey, I explain it like a seesaw, right? The more restricted it is, the more creditor protection and former spouse protection and all of that you have. As you get less restrictive, you're open up a little bit more. So you could skip the GST trust and do a spendthrift trust and just have some controls in place. But know that, if your son gets divorced, he's going to still have to pay child support in most states, even if he has a spendthrift trust. And, for my son, I would want that. If you owe child support, pay it. But everyone doesn't want that. And so know that that's, a little bit less. And then outright no protection. The minute they get that money, it's open to creditors, to former spouses, to everybody.
Yeah.
And make the decision based on that, not just tax savings. Because if you Google it, it's just tax savings for the very wealthy. You don't need this.
Right.
If your child is a physician or a lawyer or another field where there are a lot of with liability,
Yeah.
right? They may get sued. They may want you to put it in a trust for them. So that's not considered their money. So I think that's the simplest way to explain it is the seesaw. The more strings that are attached, the more creditor protection.
Yeah, the safer it is. And a lot of entrepreneurs ideally will exit someday, and that's hopefully a good size check. And what I've seen is if they don't have their estate planning and taxation plans, that money gets eaten up really quickly. So talk to us a little bit about how to have a trust that owns your business so that it's protected.
Can you give me an example? It's easier if we know what kind of business do you have?
Yeah. So say that we've got a lot of clients in the med spa space. So they have a decent amount of liability, right? They're coming in and poking people and doing IVs and treatments and those sorts of things. She's an entrepreneur. She's out West. She's got a couple locations. She's probably worth $6 million. Is there a benefit to having her family trust own part of her business or own it in whole? Cause she's looking to exit.
Is it an LLC?
It's a LLC taxed as a S.
Okay. And how many members?
Just one.
She's the sole member.
Yes.
I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if things are different in the West. You know, California is really different how they do it. Here, I wouldn't recommend it. I would say you've got your LLC. It's taxed as an S corporation. You have that protection. You have your malpractice and other insurance that protects you. Um, Save your trust for your personal assets. You could always have the what do you call the shares of the business be in the trust as well and pass down to your children that way. But they're probably not inheriting it, right? Like these are assets she wants to exit, and she can take those funds and so now I'm trying to think it through with you. So she would take it and take those funds and convert them in her trust, or is that what she's thinking? Like she'll have it in the trust, and so then when it's sold, it stays in the trust.
Yeah, it's really just trying to protect her kids because she's got an
Yeah,
ex who's not nice. And so it's
right.
a matter of how do female entrepreneurs who are worth
Yeah.
a lot and are going to be worth more ensure that the beautiful thing called their business is protected and goes to the people they want it to go to.
And so the problem is a revocable trust is just you. It's revocable during your life. I think she has better protection with her LLC than she would with her revocable trust.
Okay.
An irrevocable trust, again, you're kind of stuck, right? You have this and it's you can't really make too many changes. So she loses a lot of flexibility. Um, with the irrevocable trust at her death, whatever's in there locks in.
Yeah.
And then she creates trust for her children under there so her ex can't touch the money, their exes can't touch the money. That's where the protection comes in.
Got you. So a lot of what you're saying, the trust is really for your personal assets to make
A
sure
revocable
that,
trust,
yeah,
certainly.
that's protected. And as mothers, we love our kids, but there's
Yeah.
this, I've got a 16-year-old who's now dating. She's got a boyfriend. It's great. He was at the house Friday. Wasn't awkward at
Right.
all. Right. But like it just is foreshadowing that your kids are going to bring other people into your household,
Yeah.
wives, husbands, that you then need to determine, do they get the same access to everything? And how does that work? And what if they get divorced? Like, I'm fine giving my money to the kids, but what if I don't like her husband, right? What if he's they get divorced or whatever. So just having a plan is what I hear you
Yeah.
saying is so important.
Absolutely. And I think even I've had couples come in and they say, oh, we trust each other. We don't need this. It's not because you trust each other or don't trust each other. It's this idea that in I think every state, in my state and all the states I've worked in at least, there's an elective share that a spouse can make, right? So I die, my husband can go and make an elective share for a third of my assets. That's fine. For a first marriage and we have the same children and all of that. But now everything he's inherited outright from me, he remarries, right? I hope remarry, live a great life. His spouse can make an elective share for a third of those assets. If the assets I leave him are left to him in a trust for his benefit, he's got his own assets. He doesn't need to even eat into that. It can grow tax free. It's protected for our children.
Yeah.
So it's really something the two of us are deciding to do together. It's not me saying, I don't trust you. And so your assets are here and you can only take, a certain amount for health, education, maintenance support. You can get this little, this income payment every so often. It's us deciding as a couple that this is for our children and we don't want anybody else to be able to access it. And then for their children after that. So I think it's that mindset shift from a trust means you don't trust me to we're being smart with what we've built together.
And I love what you're saying about just being on the same page of, I do trust you. Let's make sure we both want the same thing. I trust you, you trust me, we trust our kids, but we don't, but literally there's going to be, and in 10 years, there's going to be 3 other people at my Thanksgiving Day table that I didn't
Yeah.
choose to be there. Right? Like someone else
Absolutely.
chose to bring to the party. And I may or may not want them to have access to the funds that I want my kids to have access to.
And honestly, Pam, more often than that, what I've seen is the when they remarry, when your spouse remarries, the intention is everything's for my children, for our children. Dad may really want that, at some point down the road, more often than I'd like to see, there's a surprise when your elderly parent dies and now your stepmother or stepfather has inherited everything that your dad or mom said was going to be left to you.
Yeah. And
You
so
know?
then that's not a good surprise because you thought that
No.
inheritance was coming to you, the beach house was going to be in your name, and now your stepmom now has access to everything.
And then her children after that, because she can leave it to whoever she wants. And that it's not just money. I think that what people don't realize is, um, it's a lot of hurt feelings.
Mhm.
You can be secretive, you can be unequal to your children, thinking I'm not going to be here. But if you want them to have a relationship that outlives you, then these are things you talk about honestly, because you want them all to be on the same page and understand why I chose your sister instead of you as the executor, why I felt like your brother needed a little bit more,
Right.
right? Those expectations, setting them early.
Yeah, because you don't want your kids and spouse's relationship to fall apart after you're gone because of how you dictated assets were split between them. So having those conversations
Yeah.
beforehand really do help protect their long-term relationship.
Yeah. And I think that people forget that we always say estate planning is the real family law because it's not about the money a lot of the time. It's about all of this other stuff that is so related to the money.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I love it. So, what's one piece of financial advice you constantly share with clients that you see really makes a difference in both their personal and business life once they implement whatever that advice is?
I think it's to understand where you stand all the time. Know your numbers. It's so scary to face it, whether it's debt that you're worried about, whether it's, the financial health of your business. Take a deep breath, set aside a time because it's never a good time. Tell yourself, first of every month, I'm going to look at this and look at it. Get some systems in place, like, something QuickBooks, Monarch for personal, any of those, and just make yourself look because it's always, always better once you know what you're dealing with.
I agree 100%. Far too often we have entrepreneurs that come to us, and a lot of time like married couples that are working in the
Yeah,
business together, and there's just no transparency of the money. And so once they see in black and white what the numbers are, it solves a lot of problems because then he knows, she knows,
yeah,
everyone's on the same playing field.
absolutely.
So, what is next for you, Mona? What are you focused on for the rest of the year?
Oh boy. So I think we had talked about a little bit. Stellar Five Legal. I built it out to be the firm that I really wanted to be. I wish I had when I was a young attorney. And a lot of young attorneys started reaching out to me asking if I was hiring. And so, not hiring yet, but what I decided to do was build it out with this model of almost like a distributed law firm. And there are some that do it. When I started looking, I was like, oh, okay, there are firms that do something similar, but they cater really to big law and, to people who have a book of business. I wanted to build a pathway for young attorneys who are transactional, same values and goals as me, working with female founders and entrepreneurs, to have a pathway to do real work, real meaningful work in pods of attorneys, experienced and new, learning how to do this really well from the beginning, not picking up the dregs of what anybody else will give you so you can balance life and work, and build it out so that there's a tech component, that I'm working on now, getting that all set up so that it's almost plug and play. You come in, you're actually part of the law firm. It's not that we just give you this and then you're on your own. We walk you through it. And the goal is, I'm still building out all the financial pieces of it, but when you're ready, when you're at that place where you're like, you know what, I am ready to go full speed ahead. What you put in that tech fee, a piece of that has been reserved for you as an investment in partnership
Yeah.
as you go forward.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to see you build it. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
To wrap us up, I'm going to do some rapid response questions. So I'm going to
All
ask a
right.
question and you just answer, no explanation. You ready?
Okay.
Profit or growth?
Growth.
What's one business expense you'll never cut no matter what?
Technology.
What's the best money advice you've ever received?
It's not what you earn, it's what you keep.
I love that. I say it all the time.
Maybe I heard it from you.
If you had to start over today, what's the first thing that you'll do differently with your finances?
I am doing it actually. Profit first. I heard about it from you and I was like, oh, I'm going to read about this. And it's so simple and so easy to follow. I think I'm doing a little experiment. I'm implementing it in my newest business, but also in my husband's business as we're getting to the selling point to see how it works for a new business and for a healthcare business, which is a little different from other businesses. And I'm changing my answer, profit, not growth.
I love it. I love it. No worries. All right. Last question is, what does financial freedom mean to you?
Financial freedom for me, and I heard you say it, and I was like, this is my girl. I've got a picture on my phone of my husband at the beach. And when we saw the Barbie movie, he came out and he said, oh, I just want to be Raj Beach. This man has worked so hard for so long. For me, financial freedom is if in a couple years when he's 55, we can sit down and say, do you still want to work? And he can say yes, or he can say no, and it won't matter. Yeah, that's financial freedom.
I love it. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, Mona, thank you so much for talking with us today and sharing your profit story. Where can people connect with you?
Oh, on LinkedIn is my best place. It's my Rolodex, Mona Reza. And also at Stellar 5 Legal or Stellar 5 Consulting. Websites are ugly. I'm building new ones, but those are still active and working. And Mona at either stellar5legal.com or stellar5consulting.com.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. There is so much to unpack here that us as business owners, we just don't understand. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. It has been a pleasure. And listeners, if you want help getting your financial strategy in order so that you have the profit and you have the growth so that you can go to someone like Mona and get your estate plan put together, just go to pamjordan.com. We'd love to talk to you. And remember that it's not what you make that matters. It's what you keep. Everyone have a great day. Thanks.